We've discussed it, but he said that Nvidia is undervalued. You see, the AI revolution is being fueled by a single chip in the world. I take it that they are still years ahead of Huawei. And when you consider the current state of AI, barely 3% of US businesses have implemented it. All right, none in Asia, outside of China, and none in Europe. All right, sovereigns are only getting started in the Middle East. All right. All right. Thus, when you begin to consider, you mean in their act or investment in AI, that is, in the AI firms, that are actually beginning to make genuine investments. All right. So, it's really just big tech today, isn't it? And some of the more well-known businesses, in my opinion, the rest of the world is now beginning to catch up. Isn't that right? That's a boom for us. Indeed, because the United States is sort of setting the standard for the first time in 30 years. However, it is evident that the market was underestimating what was taking place, as Oracle is a prime example. And while I believe that there will be some volatility going forward, I also believe that the market will rise due to the 3Q earnings, which will provide additional proof that tech spending is beginning to occur in areas such as software, cybersecurity, and the rest of technology, including semiconductors, AMD, Broadcom, and others. In fact, I believe that what's beginning to occur is that it's spreading now. Energy and infrastructure. Huh? Simply consider autonomous. Isn't that right? You mean robotics? That use case, consumer, is something else entirely, isn't it? We're just getting started with the enterprise piece. Isn't that right? In my opinion, we are currently laying the groundwork for how the world will develop over the next 30, 40, and 50 years. Therefore, we will not resemble the Flintstones. We will have the Jetsons appearance. It is similar to what we have discussed. It appears as though what we are witnessing is real. And even if big tech has been the clear winner, isn't that right? These are the secondary and tertiary derivatives. When you look at Palantir, Oracle, AMD, Broadcom, and TSM respectively. However, it's all included in the IBS AI 3.0. It seems like the 30 names are the focus of everything we discuss, don't they? However, it is spreading throughout the rest of the computer industry. In my opinion, it is a derivation of artificial intelligence. All right. As AI spending increases, there will be more applications for quantum technology. Could you tell me what does that mean? When you consider the idea of supercomputers and what I consider to be the actual S-curve of technological potential. Quantum is incredibly interesting. Quantum actually does that. Quantum coding is like nuclear coding on steroids. Basically, in terms of energy, quantum is comparable to nuclear and atoms. All right. Additionally, that includes the government shutdown that began at midnight. You know, historically, government shutdowns have a tendency to affect stock prices because, I believe, investors realize that if they linger for a month, they will lose half of the real growth. Therefore, if it persists for a long time, it will have an effect on the market. However, investors are essentially isolating what's going on in the market from what's occurring in terms of technology and the economy. Because it seems to me that there are actually two distinct economies at work. Actually, that's explain. Spending in the tech sector is expected to increase over the next 2 years compared to the previous 10. Isn't that correct? However, if you look at the traditional economy, unemployment claims, and so it's not a recession, but it's still a difficult time, isn't it? It's a little difficult. It was obvious that the Fed was lagging, most likely by just one meeting. All right. I take it that they will have to keep cutting. By the end of the year, a few more cuts, the rates remain relatively high. All right. You're essentially waiting for the old economy to catch up to the new one. You and I have decided to disagree on the whole, like 50 bips against 25 cents. In my opinion, 50 is similar to everyone remaining calm. Although there is a fire in the theater. Correct, we're headed in the right direction. But 25 is a little bit too soon. All right, and I believe that's the problem with the 50 bips cut every time. All right, and it just makes me more optimistic about where we're going in the long run, money off the sidelines, and everything else. That's my opinion, on this cutting cycle alone, and what it will finally accomplish. What impact does interest rate reduction have on the tech industry? It's where it's eventually headed. Though, because when you look at things like Oracle's bond sale last week, I believe that's just the beginning of more and more agreements of that kind. All right. Thus, funds are being made available. And then I would just sort of summarize it by saying, tech is going to be a strong 3-year earnings season, as it were. All right. Concerns regarding sustainability will always exist, don't they? A riskier trade is created by Fed reducing. All right. A government shutdown causes some instability. We'll see how that plays out, don't we? Overall, though, as I mentioned earlier, I believe the market is headed for a higher course as the year draws to a close. Even though AMD is in a separate market, it is now seen to be narrowing the gap on Nvidia. Yes, however, 6 gigawatts is simply little compared to what Nvidia is accomplishing. A and B, it's not that big when you consider merely the percentage of AI processors AMD has been selling over the past few years. Last year, I believe it reached the high teens. This business still needs to perform. In the past few years, this company's performance with AI chips has fallen short of its goals. Additionally, I find it intriguing that Tim MD is the A in Gen AI, considering that was the topic. With Intel in there, it was going to go a little wider. By the way, we too had EA there, but it was removed. Returning to this, I simply find it intriguing that AMD, Oracle, and Intel are receiving these kinds of multiples from the market. Over the past 5 or 6 years, these 3 organizations have made terrible mistakes in their implementation of generative AI. You can therefore offer them the benefit of all these orders that they are now scheduling if you wish to re-rate them. According to what I've heard recently, the A in Gen AI is actually applied materials. Whoa. No one was listening when you tried to go back to indigenous history. It indicates that nobody was likely even listening. According to an email I have, Stephanie busted the crack. I'm not sure bust, however. The fact remains that you are doubtful of their ability to execute, fulfill, and record the revenues that these experts are predicting for them at this current moment. What are them then? Okay, so there are 50,000 chips for next year, beginning in 2026. I thought, I'm not sure. I set the chip's price at $40,000 or $2 billion. That doesn't seem like much in comparison to the revenue, I thought. It would be a pleasant bump. What's the multiple on that if it's only the beginning? I have no idea what the margin is. I also don't know that. However, the margins as comparison to Nvidia will only be, I'm not sure. I am merely putting that out there. When you consider it, how do they match Nvidia in terms of pricing? Do you understand? Yes. However, the market capitalization is almost 1/10 of Nvidia's. In other words, you're discussing proportionate dynamics. There is no doubt that it is sold at a huge discount. Whoa, that's a heady conversation, I must say. I simply wanted to ask Don. We're running out of time. No, we don't. I won't ask him then. I'll question him during the intermission. I will say this in a hurry. It is actually reassuring that AMD kept its position during the recent sell-off, trading down to the previous high of 210 from March of 24. Okay, so perhaps Tim is onto something. However, Nvidia is actually far less expensive than AMD, and its gross margin is 70% or 71% higher than AMD's 51%. Additionally, those margins may decrease if they are forced to compete on pricing. You can, in my opinion, present AMD's position more persuasively at this time. By the way, I don't think Nvidia is that pricey. Please pardon me. I'm in love with them both. Just so you know, I don't think Nvidia is that pricey.